There's a lot of buzz about the new PMBOK guide, and as a result of that, there are a lot of questions. PMP exam, CAPM exam, and everyone wondering what will change. But I want to make it very clear that the PMP exam, the CAPM exam, and the other PMI exams have not ever been based solely on the PMBOK guide. They have been based on a content outline known as the PMP exam content outline, or the CAPM exam content outline, or the RMP exam content outline, or the SP exam content outline, or the PGMP content outline. You get what I'm saying? So this new PMBOK guide is not immediately going to demand that the knowledge in the book is regurgitated by anyone. It's never been the case. So today we're going to talk about the PMBOK guide, and I have quite a few of them from the second edition. I didn't get the first just yet, but I got all the other editions, the second on down. But I also want you to know that the 8th edition is just another PMBOK guide in a series, and there will be a 9th and a 10th. And the way things have been going, the PMBOK guide 6th edition seems to have been the most dominant one that I've seen across the world of PMI, practice project management. In fact, a lot of the organizations I've trained and coached and mentored, they have stayed at the 6th edition, refusing to go to the 7th, because they found a ton of value in the 6th edition, and it made more sense because it was very distinct in terms of things like stakeholder management, procurement management, bridging a load of the worlds of management and business, bringing a lot of those worlds together and giving a united front for the project manager. But will the 8th edition surpass the 6th? I guess time will tell, but a few telltale signs tell me that it probably will not. And I want to share that with you today, and also talk about the evolution of project management in today's world. So without much ado, let's jump straight into it. I was one of the final reviewers who took a look at the PMBOK Guide 8th edition and gave my commentary. So all those who have worked on it, they've done a lot of hard work. Doff my hat to them. Being part of that committee must be a huge sacrifice, and I want to appreciate that. Let's talk about why PMBOK lost dominance after the 6th edition, and let's discuss if the 8th will bring it back. So we'll take a peek at the 6th edition, break down why the decline, the contrast with Agile, why PMBOK 8's impact in my mind may be modest, and the bottom line implications. PMBOK 6, as I said, had a great adoption rate. I mean, like, I am one of those trainers who goes on the road to deliver training, multiple weeks of training to organizations, pharmaceutical, healthcare, engineering, architecture, you name it. I've trained all these places, the universities, quite a number of universities as well. And what I realized is that when it got to the 6th edition, that seemed to be the nirvana for a lot of companies. They were very happy about the 6th. They invested in templates and tools and that infrastructure to have the 6th as their benchmark, as their standard. It had very clear processes and structure. You see, one of the things I noticed is a lot of these organizations, they have their own principles and values and ideas anyway. So bring in new values, ideas, and principles. While it's not looked down on, they typically have an ethos and code of ethics that helps them anyway. So what they're looking for the most seems to be some direction on process, procedures, guidelines. Give us a framework that we can bring into the firm and help people with. So it's very easy for firms to take the 6th, and it's so clear cut, and it became the enterprise's muscle memory. Okay, bring it in. Let's plug it in. Our people already have some good instincts about business. They just need to know how the flow of project management goes. And of course, there'll be tweaks and customizations that were very easy, because when you look at the structure of the 6th, it's pretty much integration, which everyone understands. You need to integrate everything. Then it's scope with a very discrete set of things to do. You got to plan the scope management. You got to collect the requirements. You got to define scope. You got to create the WBS. You got to validate the scope. You got to control the scope. It's very simple, very easy to understand. So even at that high level, without going into the dregs of the ITTOs, they got it, because they have their own tools, their own mechanisms, whether they use a WBS or they use a requirements document of some sort, or they use a requirements traceability matrix. Easy, plug and play all day. And the same for all of the other processes and knowledge areas. It's very easy, because when you talk about schedule, they would say, oh, we got a scheduling tool, we use MS Project, or we use Primavera, or we use PlanView or something else. And then you talk about cost. They either use Excel or those who are more advanced have more upscale tools they use. You talk about quality. A lot of them have quality departments. Many of them have health and safety bolted onto that as well. Resources, they may even have resource tools they use. Communications, everyone gets that. Risk, a lot of the firms, they went hook, line, and sinker with the 6th edition, and they took all those 7 risks processes: plan risk management, identify risk, perform qualitative, quantitative, plan risk responses, implement risk responses, monitor risk. They took all that stuff and they put it into risk registers and risk processes. Some of them way advanced, and you know, they really invested a lot of thought into that. And then you talk about procurement. PMBOK 6 had you covered. even though they had stripped away some of the other processes that were in old PMBOK guides, but the 6 had you covered with procurement and then stakeholder. Then you introduce the concept of 7th edition. No structure with discrete processes to follow. No one's home. No one cared. I'm telling you, a lot of the firms are like, Phil, principles, we get it. We get leadership. We get soft skills. And I know there's some nuances in the 7th that I value. And while they accepted that, they weren't going to buy new PMBOK guides for their project managers because they're like, it's all in the 6th. Okay, let's just download what PMI has, auxiliary PDFs about the principles. And they were pretty much done. And on top of that, there's also the Agile Practice Guide, which gives very clear direction, for Agile. Shout out to the people who created the Agile Practice Guide. They've now got the 2nd edition, which has a lot extra. But the original Agile Practice Guide was also a home run. So you bring the 6th and the Agile Practice Guide. It seemed like a match made in heaven. Many firms love that. And they would have me train what was in the Agile Practice Guide along with the 6th. They were happy. Even though the 7th existed, they really weren't bothered. And then, moreover, no matter how much I try to push the idea of students studying the 7th, they weren't buying it. They're like, Phil, I don't need to study the 7th. And, you can preach all day long to students to study a PMBOK guide. If they don't find value in it, trust me, they're not studying it. And a lot of the adoption of the 6th was because many of the questions had hardcore project management baked in from the 6th. Are you kidding me? You don't want to read the 6th? You'll be in trouble. But when the 7th came out and when the exam began to morph and change, people are like, I don't need to read that. That stuff isn't on the exam. I'm just gonna focus on this. So I wanted people to embrace the principles because I felt there was some value in the 7th edition, So that is pretty much the story of how it went. A lot of organizations, they spend major budgets building PMOs, templates and systems based on the 6th, governance frameworks, training programs, and a high sunk cost reduces appetite for rapid change. And the 7th edition came along, right? Needing some rapid change, especially because everything had changed from process groups and knowledge areas to these very odd domains that no one understood anything about. On the screen here, I just wanted you to be sensitized to the fact that a lot of organizations have alternate ways of looking at project management. Now, this is a little bit small, and I apologize, I can't get it much bigger, but on the screen here, we have the PMBOK guide, the APMBOK, IPMA's solution, Prince2, and then Agile. So when you talk about project management frameworks, the PMBOK is not the only one. And when you approach organizations, especially those in the UK, all right, and Europe, they're gonna come with their own interpretation of some of these things. And when all is said and done, you have like a mix of terminologies because they've been rooted in many terminologies from years gone by that it's almost impossible to eradicate all those terminologies and just bottom line everything with PMBOK. It's hard. So the appeal was, okay, this is good. We'll get our people to know the terminology. We do a lot of business with companies around the world that use PMBOK. But as far as how we structure our project management, it already fits one of these. So PMBOK influence, though huge, has always been countered with alternatives, such as what you see on the screen. Now, in comes Agile. Take a look at the Agile world. Since 2001, the Agile Alliance, I should say the 17 original co-creators, rest in peace, Mike Beadle, but all the other 16, they're pretty much, through the test of time, stay true to the Agile Manifesto values and principles. 4 values, no change for the past 24 years. 12 principles, no change. And you ask, why is it that they're still relevant till today? Because it's all about the practicing of the principles that has given it such longevity. When you practice the principles, you find that there's tremendous truth in them, tremendous value in the Agile values and principles. And that's why it has stood the test of time, because there's no hurry to implement the latest flavor of the day. So the stability has been built on trust. The adoption is driven by practice and community, putting this thing into production. So the PMBOK shifted identity in the 7th edition instead of strengthening it. The identity shift created big issues. PMBOK 7 removed core process architecture. There was a shift, as I said, towards principles and domains, and it disrupted continuity and embedded practices. It felt very abrupt. If you read on Amazon, all the comments, a lot of comments, they did not favor it. It felt very abrupt for a historically predictive based standard. Now, when the 6th came in with Agile flavors, it was good. But as a result of the diverging into the 7th that seemed like in limbo, no man's land, there's confusion in adoption, slower organizational transition, emergence of homegrown hybrid frameworks, and the PMBOK was seen as optional guidance versus being a manual, an operating manual. And while we don't want people to be rigid and restricted, I do want to make it clear that organizations do, whether we like it or not, organizations do want to be told how to do it. And they're looking to us as professionals, as experts, to lead the way and guide the way. And if we're not producing that, if we're not providing that, then there's lack of interest. People begin to see things differently. And it becomes, okay, we don't have to do that. PMBOK 8 is now bringing in a new, fresh idea of rebalancing principles and processes. It's not a full reset, but it's a refinement. Many organizations have already settled on the 6. They're not moving for many more years to come, except there's some groundbreaking value, right? Limited disruption equals limited urgency. So for many, I already know it's going to be like, okay, that's fine, but we're already rooted in this. We're already invested in this. A decade hasn't passed. We invested hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're not doing anything else. So what matters now to many firms is stability, practical usability. A human-centric delivery is also important, and the integration of predictive and agile without identity swings. People are not ready for that. The bottom line is PMBOK didn't fail on ideas, but on change pacing. Too much change too quick. Project management values stability. We don't want to be all over the place. We cannot afford. You know how long it takes to implement a standard in a firm? It's not a year's affair. So by the time people are just settling into a standard, you're changing it again. Standards need to evolve for that reason without abandoning their core. In order for the PMBOK 8 to be valuable, we need to teach it with clarity and consistency and emphasize the practice over the paper. We also need to anchor in hybrid models in reality, not trends. We need to prepare teams for PMBOK 8, but avoid that knee-jerk reaction. And we must be honest. Now, what exactly is in the PMBOK Guide 8th edition? Let's take a look at the table of contents and break it down. So this is available on PMI's website, okay? Chapter 1 and the preface are pretty much things we would expect to see, very similar to the 7th edition. The 7th edition brought a very good addition of value by mentioning a value delivery system and giving a model. It's solid. I like it. I like what we have in the 7th. I'm glad they didn't change it. It's here in the 8th. Then we get into, unfortunately, another needless change, the project management principles. I was warming up to what they had in the 7th, but now in the 8th, I don't know why they have decided to scramble the principles, take some out, put some in, change very minor things. I think it's very needless and tedious to have done that. So again, we're going to lose some organizations that have already adopted the 12 principles. It's unfortunate when this happens because it's semantics and needless. Also here, we talk about the project management, so-called performance domains. Now, what was in the 7th edition seemed to be like just changing the knowledge areas, but at least they had 8 things they had listed. Now in the 8th edition, they've taken away those domains and replaced them with something else. That sounds more like a cross between knowledge areas and domains, but they're still being called domains. We'll talk about that later. And then we have the regular project life cycles, pretty standard. And then we have what they're calling project management focus areas. I don't know why we don't just call them process groups like we did. All of these things add confusion and move people away from models they used to. The second part of the book, which again could be very confusing because we have one part of the book numbered differently from the second part of the book. So you have 2-page 1s, 2-page 2s, and stuff like that, just like the 7th edition, which I don't think was good. This is why the 6th edition was an easier, straightforward read. But anyway, moving in here, we can see we've got an introduction, and then it goes into the performance domains, which is really just a camouflaged knowledge area set with needless change again. I would have just preferred they bring back the knowledge areas. There's absolutely no reason to call them performance domains. Now PMI has a PMBOK 8 that is very different from PMBOK 7, and they now have process groups, a practice guide, which is starkly different from this. So these are part of my frustrations as a 20-year veteran with the PMI when things change up and down. No reason. There is absolutely no reason why we need to have a governance performance domain, because governance is part of integration. And at the project manager level, we do not need to label it as governance. This is better at the programmatic and portfolio level, but bringing this language and moving integration out, in my mind, is a disservice. I'm not very happy about that. And then we have scope, which is a knowledge area, now called a performance domain, schedule, a performance domain, finance. There's a difference between financing a project and managing costs. And I really wish they had left it at finance for program and portfolio, but cost for project. A lot of these are misguided changes in my mind. Stakeholder performance domain, same thing as stakeholder knowledge area, resources, same thing, risk, same thing, but now calling them performance domains. And now they've taken out procurement. So if you keep scrolling, you find that procurement has been dumped in the appendix. I don't think this is a very sensible move. and I did make mention of this. I did give my commentary, and nonetheless, they've gone ahead with all of these changes. You see, these are things you cannot defend when you are at a client site on the road and they're questioning you and getting frustrated and fed up of needless changes. So what is going to happen in 2026 is the PMBOK 8th will launch, and the PMP exam will still be based on how best you can solve problems. So I would advise anyone who is trembling and being scared to not be scared. Don't be afraid. The PMP exam will not be changing drastically. Also, no announcement of a content outline changing has been announced. The PMBOK guide is usually added as auxiliary reading for the exam, but before the outline is updated, will also take some time. So if you're taking the PMP exam, don't worry about it. You don't need to read the 8th edition at this time. When the need arises, PMI will make that announcement and we'll go from there. Okay. Do you think the 8th edition will be a game changer? I do like the fact that they've added a piece about AI, which is much needed in the appendices. In fact, let's go there real quick. So if we go over here to the appendices, you'll find the mention of artificial intelligence. And this is a good addition, right? Strategies for AI adoption, state of the market. This is definitely a worthwhile addition. Also, we have a mention made of PMOs, which, PMOs have been in the PMBOK guide, nothing new. And then the evolution of the PMBOK guide and so on. So while change is good, I feel that needless change only takes us back, especially when you cannot defend that change. They're tough words to swallow, but it is what it is. That's my opinion. I'm wondering, those of you who've been in the industry for a substantial amount of time, what do you think? Were you one of the final reviewers? Did you do the due justice to review the 8th edition and give your own 2 cents? Because if no one's talking about it and sharing contrary viewpoints, well, that's why we always get what we got. Then everyone's complaining at the end. So it's unfortunate if you didn't review the 8th edition, but definitely put it on your calendar in the next 3 years. Whenever the discussions start, make sure you get involved, because in the multitude of voices of PMPs, there's going to be steering the ship. The 7th edition could have even been much worse if there wasn't some steering the ship as a result of people giving some pretty strong commentaries. Okay, thank you very much. Bye for now.